Hi everyone, this is Kim, and you are listening to Unfiltered Wednesdays, the show where we have rare, unfiltered conversations about navigating big life transitions as a student, a professional, and a human being. Today's episode is about what it looks like to arrive somewhere with almost nothing familiar and decide anyway to build something that lasts, not just a career, a reputation, a community, a reason for other people to feel less alone in the process. My guest today came to the United States on a sport and academic scholarship, figured out the hardest part on his own, and then did something most people don't. He wrote it all down so the next person wouldn't have to start from zero. This is the story. Let's get into it. Alfredo Serrano is originally from Spain, who arrived in Missouri at 18 on a soccer and academic scholarship with no network, no family nearby, and a system nobody explained to him. Today, he is a senior data scientist at Management Solutions, where he leads the U.S. AI Hub and works with some of the world's largest financial institutions. His academic path was anything but linear. He began his undergrad study at Lindenwood University, Missouri, transferred to Suffolk University, and is now pursuing a micro-master's in statistics and data science at MIT. But what makes Alfredo's story remarkable isn't just the credentials. It's what he built alongside them. A personal brand that reaches over 800,000 people every month on LinkedIn, a community of international students and first-generation professionals who found him up in his content when they had none, and recognition as a LinkedIn top voice in both 2024 and 2025. So Alfredo, how are you doing? Really glad to have you here.
Hey, Kim. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure.
So Alfredo, you came to the U.S. at 18 on a sport and academic scholarship. Can you paint that picture? What did you think was waiting for you on the other side, and did you find anything different?
I think that's a pretty good question because I think coming from Europe, you have a very predisposed idea of what you're going to find in the US in regards to the culture, the opportunities, and life itself, right? When I got, to Missouri, which is very rural and it's a very charming population in that sense. It's very welcoming. I was glad to meet and find a lot of people willing to help me out in a community that was willing to support each other, especially because everything was new to me. The culture, the ways in which, again, people interact with each other and socialize in that sense. And then how things really work. Coming to college and being a student athlete is such a unique experience that unless you get to experience it, there's no way that I could give you a whole scope of what the experience entails. So it was really good. Coming to the US, of course, it's a land of opportunity, and that's what I hope to get. And I was heavily surprised that that's exactly what I found. Again, I came to a country in which people uplift each other, try to help out as much as they can, and are willing to upskill and upscale you in many ways so that you can succeed, which in Europe, it's a bit different, and the community and the mentality is way different than what people would expect.
I'm really glad you found a very good experience and found your community and also being able to experience all of this in such a young age. So do you also have anything that you were not expected and it was some kind of, challenging for you at that time? And actually, how did you really overcome them and how did you adapt to yourself?
Sure. I think that, again, the US culture is very different from the culture in Spain. And again, coming as a teenager, being 18, when you're still discovering yourself, understanding what do you want to be in life and what do you want to do ultimately, it's a very challenging point in time for your life. And finding people that was very close to my way of thinking, and also were in similar situations, student athletes, people who were pursuing to stay here full time after school, really helped me out, especially when I moved to Boston and I made that transition in 2020. I really found my village, but in order for me to do that, I had to become a villager, on that sense that I had to adapt to the culture. I had to make the efforts to find American people that will be willing to explain to me, hey, this is how we do things, this is how we interact, this is how we go about life, this is how we think on ambition, on professionality, on social dynamics. So it's quite a challenge and it's quite an experience. But I think it was more a matter of I was willing to immerse myself onto the culture, and I wasn't afraid to open myself to new experiences. I think that ultimately was the game changer.
That's really great. So you had a lot of things happening at that time. You are in sport, and you also, you mentioned to me in the earlier that you also had tried to get a good GPA and everything. So of everything that you were juggling, GPA, the roster sport, a new language, and fitting into a culture that wasn't yours, and you mentioned that you try to be a villager. Well, what's the hardest thing that nobody saw at the time?
Sure. First of all, and I'm going to say this lightly, it's a beautiful and ideal situation to have so many things to fight for and to be willing to get into that spot, right? As you were saying, like, I needed to maintain a certain GPA, which was a 3.75 to maintain my scholarship. I wanted to, of course, start on my team, which I was one of the captains by my senior year here at Suffolk University. I was looking for jobs right after graduation. So everything, plus I want to be involved into the school, socially wise, and then with clubs and everything. It was a lot to handle. And I think the most difficult part is even though you find your people, you find your community, you have friends, it feels very lonely at times. And at the same time, it's very difficult to explain to other people why you're feeling that way, why you're going through those things, unless you're living it, really. Juggling everything at the same time can be very overwhelming at times. Like specifically finding the job for me, for example, was the most difficult part because I felt like there was really no guidance or like of a specific framework that I could work on or with. And I think it was very difficult in the sense that you cannot go home. You cannot go back home because it's a disappointment for people that love you, for yourself. You cannot like whim about it, right? You cannot like be complaining because it's not going to do anything about it. And you really have people that want to help you, but maybe are not willing to help you. So ultimately, it resorts to you figuring out. And for you to figure that out, it takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of willpower to figure out how to help myself, how to help others. Am I doing the right things at the right time? Am I pushing myself enough? So for me, what really helped out was writing things, documenting them, and giving it to other people to see if it will work for them and it will help them. And ultimately, not only I found that more people were struggling, just like myself, specifically international students, but also saw that there was a huge disconnect on what university brings you as a whole in terms of
Mhm.
value, and then how the real world looks like, not only professionally, but like also like socially in terms of dynamics. And that disconnect allowed me to really like focus on solving this problem for other people because I had to experience it myself first.
So, yeah, I totally agree that when you are in that pressure and when you're overwhelmed by different factors, so it can be job search, it can be new community, and it can be anything. Sometimes people say that you have to be connect with your community, but actually this is the hardest time to
Yeah.
connect with community because you just don't really want to talk to anyone. So I'm curious. I know you mentioned that you are documenting things. Are there anything that you did at that time, to really manage the experience?
Yeah. I think ultimately it came down to two things, really. First of all, it was the organization of my life, which I was very lucky that I started to like create systems for myself. Not only like when am I doing my homework, for example, because I had like 6 a.m. practices at some point, plus 12 p.m. practices, plus studying or classes on the afternoon. So I started to create systems on when I had to distribute my work, when I had to distribute the social leadership that I was doing for like the school clubs and stuff like that. And then I would always set aside some leisure time aside from like the soccer and like all the extracurriculars, when can I hang out with my friends? When can I distribute time for me to focus on the job search or bettering myself or learning more about things that I want to do? Plus, I was doing freelancing at that point. So first it was creating those systems. And after I was able to do that, my time management was much, much easier to navigate on that sense.
Mm.
And the second thing is the part of exploration that I don't think many people talk about. I think college is such a great time for you to fail and experiment on things that I
Mhm.
dedicated a lot of time to try different things, not in like
Mm.
sports and like weird side quests, like going out to bars, going to like cooking lessons and stuff like that, but also because I really wanted to figure out what I wanted to do for a living and how I could do it best. I was trying like multiple different things through freelancing, through giving classes, and that combination of those two things, being willing to fail and then figuring out the systems that would make my life easier, allow me to work for others and help others, which ultimately, again, towards my last year, and I'm going to go back to this again, my biggest hurdle was finding a job because the international student community, we were really struggling to like figure out how to land a job properly, how to get interviews, how not to get rejected. And once I figured out the patterns that were helping me, because I was willing to try and experiment a lot of different things, I was educating myself with YouTube, and I was willing to reach out to people on LinkedIn and tell them, hey, this is my situation. I don't know what to do, but I'm sure you know how to do it because you know my situation before. That allowed me to discover these patterns on things that work, things that definitely don't work, things that might work for me. And I started to write everything down, and once I got the job, I was like, okay, I wish I could have done this sooner. I wish I would have like done this faster so that I didn't have to go through so much pain and hurdles. Let me pass it to the next generation. Let me pass it to other people that will or are struggling with this item or issue. And ultimately like forging that loop of I do, I give, and I get rewarded by helping others.
That's really beautiful. So is this also important, willing to fail and not really afraid to try new things, really open-minded? So in terms of that, on your LinkedIn, I know that you have a lot of valuable content over there. So if anyone listening, you can go to Alfredo. He has a lot of resources over there. So going back to our conversation, you mentioned that the locker room teaches you things a classroom that can discipline, showing up for your team when your own performance is off, handling pressure publicly. How did those lessons land when you step into a professional environment?
100%. I think, and this is not talked enough about, ultimately your value in the world comes down to three things: the quality of your ideas, the way you're able to express those ideas, right? Which I think ultimately that is huge, communication, but also how you're able to interact with others. And I think that college as a whole, the experience, it's really good at fostering you getting more ideas and better ways to go at them. But the communication and interaction part, it's very siloed on the classes, on the clubs, on the events. Whereas for me, again, the student athlete experience was insane on the sense of, first of all, I got to interact with 30 people on a daily basis, in which we all had different interests individually because everyone wants to make a spot on the team, because everyone's hurdling or challenging in many different ways with their social life, with college itself, getting the grades, getting the jobs, with their personal lives as well, their family, everything that's going on with them, adapting to the school, adapting to the country or the state. And then when I was put in a position of being in leadership as a captain, the social dynamics of how you have to handle things individually and treating every single person individually as a whole different world, it's unique because then you can translate that to everything. You go to the corporate world and some of the lessons like how to be a good team player, how to be a good leader, how to be able to give feedback on a way that someone would actually not take it personal and take it so that they can challenge themselves and better themselves is very difficult. And an environment like soccer, in which you have a common objective and you have 30 people waiting for 11 spots, at the end of the day, it's beautiful because it really allows you to, again, experiment, see multiple things, learn from them, and then, like A/B testing, right? Try and adjust out of it. And that's what I found. And that's how I found that community of people that we all had our individual interest, but we were all able to sacrifice something for the good of the team. And a good example of that is my last year, which we got to a new conference. It was the first time that we made the playoffs, but because we created such a good culture of what the team wanted, needed, and how we were willing to treat each other and handle each other, the next year they made the finals, for example. And 2 years later, they won the conference. So it was a matter of creating the right culture, the right pieces, and all those teachings and lessons that we got along the way were actually helpful and actually served for something, which is ultimately, I think, the point.
So, okay, there's a lot of things that you can directly apply to your every day in your life. It can be corporate setting, it can be going out with friends, or it can be a lot of things. That's beautiful, and thank you for sharing that. And you describe your content as the map you build for yourself. So what are the 2 or 3 things that are most consistently missing for international student when they arrive? The thing that nobody explained.
Yeah, that's a great question, honestly. And I think it remains on 3 pillars. First of all, I think we undervalue ourselves a lot. We don't put enough of value on who we are, what we do, what we know, and how we go about things. So I think a lot of students are missing that because it takes so much for them to be rewarded with a job, with a position, we're willing to compromise things. And that's not right. Everyone here is bringing their unique and differential value, and you have to hone on it and specialize yourself and go for it. That's the number one thing. The second is I don't think people put itself that much out there. And when I say this is people are now willing to express, to put themselves out, and to create a personal brand, which is what ultimately helped me so much. If we're doing this conversation right now, it's because you found me and you found me on LinkedIn or social media because I'm willing to put myself out there and I'm willing to put my fears, my thoughts, my lessons, my challenges, and my wins for others, not to see and brag, but actually to serve as a lesson. And that's what I found that once I was willing to put myself out there, especially in college, to put out what was I learning? How was I going about things? What was I building by myself? People actually start to reach out to me. I didn't have to reach out any longer. And we can talk later about the stats, but when I was applying to jobs, I got like 30 something people reach out to me just because of the projects that I was willing to put on LinkedIn. So that's number 2. We compromise a lot because, again, we don't value ourselves enough. We don't put ourselves out there as much. And then I think that there's a lot of misinformation and miscommunication on how to go about things. And people are willing to help each other under the right circumstances, which it shouldn't be that way, right? There should be more people like me, if you ask me, that are willing to help others, that are willing to share the materials, that are willing to tell you hey, I'm the first one to recognize I did not think the right way. And that's why it took me so long. And that's why I had to go through so many hurdles. But because I'm willing to do that for you, I hope someday you're willing to do that for someone else so that we can create this loop of feedback in the sense of we are here on the same situation, we're here on the same problems. Let's help each other out, figure out. So I think it's ultimately those three pillars that are very interconnected. And you see that along all international students. My resume is not good enough. I don't know what I should do about it. Have you thought about someone that already got a job as an international student? Reach out to them, talk to them, see what worked out for them. I'm not getting traction on LinkedIn. Have you started to post thought leadership on your specific niche, what you're studying, why you're studying it, what you want to do with it? What specific skills do you bring to the table? I don't have enough people to reach out to help me. Why don't you create a community yourself? Again, for you to have your own village, you should become a villager yourself. You should be willing to give in order to receive.
Thank you so much. That very practical advice and also very insightful. Actually, that brings me to the next question. You have said that your network is who you know and who knows what you can do. So for students who feel like they have no network and no proof of what they are capable of, where do they actually start? And how does building a real portfolio, one that solves actual problem, not just follow tutorial, fit into that?
That's a great question. And I think the answer lies on the phrasing itself. You are a student, hence you have a teacher. Your teacher should be the first point of network or connection you're going to have. And the reason why is because I think networking should be layered. You always want to have different levels within network. You want to have someone that is one step above you because that means that he's probably going to live or has lived already where you're willing to go or where you're trying to go. So if I'm a senior data scientist myself right now, and I have multiple mentors, one mentor that I keep is someone who's two levels above me because it means in 2, 3 years, I'm going to go through the same things that he's going through. So you should layer again the people you have. You want to have people that are going to experience or that are already where you want to be. And then you want to have people on top of it that are neurodivergent, that are going to teach you things that are completely out of your realm. With that said, for students, and I think people overcomplicated this a lot, your first years, in my opinion, should be more about shadowing, finding people that are right for you, that you can connect well with personality wise, and that are on places you want to go to or you're willing to go to in a couple of years. That's why I think that the professor is the first step because it's someone that definitely has way more knowledge than you on a specific topic that you are pursuing for whatever reason, whether it's for professional or social intents, right? So the professor is going to be able to allow you to have a better understanding of your field. Then your peers. We don't network enough with our classmates. We think that they are only there just to go party and go grab a burger, when instead we should be willing to go the next step and say, Kim, where are you from? What's your background? And why are we here? I'm from Spain. I'm from the middle of like a town in Spain, in Madrid, that is remote from here. Why did you come to Boston as well? So be willing to learn from other people that are in the same situation as you, right? Because they can really push you since you guys are on the same level on many things. And then the last one is I think people don't go to enough events. I think universities nowadays do a really good job on creating events that are really good, not only in terms of community, but in terms of learning, in terms of like putting yourself out there, in terms of like getting job opportunities. And I think when people understand this layering or these three things to do, networking becomes much easier. And the last step, if I mean, is networking ultimately has to be genuine. There is always a transactional component of course, symbiotically, you're giving me something and I'm giving you something. But if it's not genuine and if you're not getting a genuine connection with that person, it's going to be very difficult to maintain over time. And something that I really like doing is I have 5 mentors that are within my professional, social endeavors, and then all the things that I'm very interested on achieving in life. And they are somewhere or another like where I want to be. Every 3 months, I send them a letter or I send them an email or I send them a text. Let's grab a coffee. Let's reconnect. See where you are. See where I am. Maybe I can help you with something. Maybe you can help me with something. And I think if people are a bit more consistent on that realm, it's going to be a game changer for them.
Wow, that's really powerful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. To conclude the conversation for today, you have lived the version of this story that most international students are just studying. If you could sit down with someone who just landed, overwhelmed, excited, probably a little lost, what's the one thing you want them to hear before they figure it out the hard way?
It's very difficult. If it were to be me with 18 years old, arriving to the country for the first time in the middle of nowhere in Missouri, where I didn't know where I was getting into, I would tell myself be willing to make more mistakes because out of those mistakes, your biggest wins are going to arrive. I think that's a bit powerful to say on the sense of realistically, if you're not willing to put yourself out there, try and fail, you're never going to know what you're good at, where do you want to go, what's going to hurt. what's going to feel like, oh, I should keep trying this. And ultimately, you're going to find your direction towards this. I feel many international students come here with a mentality of, I need to do things perfectly because only that will allow me to succeed. Whereas I think we're on a point in time in which we should ultimately encourage people to say and think, I'm here and I'm put on this specific situation to fail and learn as much as I can, or I'm willing to try to see what the next step is, to see where I want to go, what I want to do, how I want to help others, and ultimately what my impact should be.
Thank you so much. It's really good and it's really beautiful. So, Alfredo, thank you again for being so generous with us today. And what you have shared isn't just a success story, it's a reminder that the people who build something real are almost always the one who's decide to give it away first. If today's episode gives you something, a new perspective, a moment of feeling less alone, or just one thing you want to try, share it with someone, one person who needs to hear it right now. And follow us on Instagram at shine.co and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We release a new story every 2 weeks because nobody should have to figure it out this all. I'm Kim and this is Unfiltered Wednesday, and we'll see you in next 2 weeks.